the root of almost everything that we're going through has to do with our thinking. And then those thoughts or how we think turns into a belief about ourselves, about people, about things around us, about life. And then those beliefs turn into how we act or choose to act, which then turns into emotions and it turns into behaviors. So, in order to repattern some of that and to look at our emotions and how I might fly off the handle or I might be angry about something in a way, there's nothing wrong with being angry, but it's how we do that. It's the way we present ourselves. And to be honest, I've had major anger issues because of what's been done.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome, warriors. Trish Zenczak is a program director, advocate, speaker, and trauma-informed education consultant, dedicated to changing lives through awareness, support, and action. As a former foster child, foster mom, and adoptive mom, she understands firsthand the challenges within the system and has spent over 35 years on a path of healing, growth, and advocacy. Now serving as the program director at Speak Up for Kids, a nonprofit committed to advocacy and support for children in foster care, Trish works to ensure foster youth and young adults aging out of the system have access to critical resources that help them become stable, thriving members of society. She is also the host of Society's Child, Christian Teacher Support for Managing Disruptive Behaviors, where she helps educators navigate student behavior through trauma-informed strategies, faith-based encouragement, and mental health tools. Trish believes that when teachers understand the deeper needs behind behaviors, they can create real connection, restore peace, and transform classrooms into places of growth and healing. Now, before we get to Trish's story, here is a review from Terry J. Such a powerful show. This is such a great show and will help so many people trying to overcome domestic violence. Thank you so much for your kind words, Terry J. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode? Go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Who knows? I just might read yours next. And then after you leave your review, come join us in the Warrior Words Facebook community at facebook.com/groups/Warrior Words. After you hit that request button, please answer the questions that pop up, and I look forward to getting to know you in there. Now, grab a tissue and join Trish and me as we discuss group homes, foster care, education, and of course, healing. Let's rock. Welcome, Trish Zenczak, to the Warrior Words podcast. I am thrilled that you've joined us today.
Thank you, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's jump right in because you and I have an interesting experience in common, but from two different perspectives. We both have been involved in a group home environment in our past. And so I'd like it if you would share with our listeners maybe a little bit, about the group home experience, but maybe even how you got there.
Sure. My brother and I were little, and someone outside of our home, including some neighbors, discovered some things going on, and I believe that there were some reports made. So we ended up living with a few other foster families starting from our church, and then eventually went into some group care because we were separated when we were young. So this happened very early. And then I think I was in the group home for about 4.5 years, then returned home back when I was about 13. And at that time, still dysfunctional at home. There were some circumstances in the group home. My brother and I had come home before me that returned us back home into a still dysfunctional environment. And so from 13 until about 16, I was there in the middle of all that, and then quit high school and moved out on my own and lived on my own at 16. And that's when some mentors, it's interesting how God works, because someone that I met earlier when I was younger in the group home happened to live in the same town, who then became a lifelong mentor and someone who influenced me and helped me get back into school, then got me back in, so that I ended up graduating, going to college, later becoming a foster mom, adoptive mom, now advocate for kids in foster care, being even on advisory boards for group homes, and then now work in a foster care environment, and now advocate for teachers who are dealing with kids that have tough and challenging behaviors. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
Oh, well, it's interesting that you mentioned how God works, because I've noticed in a lot of my episodes that people share that, well, they can now do what they do because of the trauma, because of the
Mm-hmm.
traumatic experience that they lived through, and that God used that experience to allow them to now, in one way or another, help others
Mm-hmm.
through similar experiences. And that's what I heard in there, that you had your foster and your group home experiences, and now you are able to
Mm-hmm.
help kids in similar situations.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it's about, because, you know, we easily can go through situations and come out on the other side of them. But I think most of us in hindsight always go, wow, if I hadn't have gone through that, I wouldn't be as strong as I am now, or I wouldn't have had this experience, or if this person hadn't come into my life, I wouldn't have this lesson or have learned that. So I think it's true everywhere. And I'm even seeing it in raising my son. When things are easy for him, sometimes it's tempting to really take his pain away and take that elasticity away from him, to not make him have to stretch or work hard. But then I realized just how much of a disservice that's happening for him, because he's not getting those opportunities to stretch and realize, wow, I learned so much going through that. And I believe it's the iron sharpening iron, it's the heat of the fire, it's all of those things that make us stronger in who we are today.
Absolutely. So how
Yeah.
then, wait, let me take a step back, because you said about these people and how these different circumstances, and you mentioned quitting high school, and then
Mm-hmm.
that mentor steps in,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure it wasn't instantaneous, but
Mm-mm.
worked with you and got you to a point where you were able to go back to school. So you were able
Mm-hmm.
to go back and make those improvements and learn those lessons. And
Mm-hmm.
that was something that struck me there. Um, because it could have gone a different way. And now I mean, I know that your life wasn't all sunshine and roses
Mm-hmm.
when you left the group home and got to be reunited with your family. But if that mentor hadn't stepped in,
Mm-hmm.
then that pathway would have been, or could have been, much different. Is that?
100%. I think, they people have often said to me, I'm surprised you didn't end up, and you fill in the blank, with,
Mhm.
all kinds of things that could have happened. And I truly believe, honestly, that a lot of it was because people started praying for me very young. If we're praying for kids these days, don't think it doesn't do any good. It does. Those prayers are, they're sealed, and they're there. And I do believe that the projection and the prayers that came into my life helped redirect and protect me along the way. And for even situations like this, when a mentor comes back into my life and helps speak words of wisdom into me, that then gave me hope, or all the little lessons I learned along the way of wanting better for my life, or wanting different, or not taking. Now, it doesn't mean that I didn't go down a yucky road. I still had the dysfunction. I still had the traumatic experience. I still had hurt, wounded soul stuff going on, a lot of rejection issues, which, fast forward to 50 years old, those things still rear their heads at times. But the things that came about as the result of a mentor or someone speaking into my life, she's not the only one. There were teachers, there were educators, there were group home people, there were sponsors, as we called them back then. There's been people through my life, in, as we can all think of times when people have spoken into my life, that I believe were as a result of prayers that were said over me and for me and through me and with me, that helped me be able to not only just receive what they were giving me, but take those pieces of wisdom to be able to use. Maybe not in the moment, maybe it wasn't something I heard in that moment, but I took those pieces to then later kind of build who I am today, and sometimes even negate the yucky that was spoken over me when I was younger, because there was a lot of negativity, a lot of abuse. And at any given time when I was younger, up until like I was 12, there were, I did my story at one point and I forget, it's in my book. I try to let go of the past a lot, but I had probably 8 perpetrators by the time I was 12. And, the junk that was spoken over me at that time, was something I could have focused on. But at the same time, it's been beautiful that there have been people that have come in. So I call it like Satan's lies that were being spoken over me in the middle of a lot of this dysfunction that even happened. And then these people were able to help me see God's replies and God's love, that the truth that was really truly spoken over me, and help me to rebuild. Not always taken in the moment, because I did go down a difficult path, but at least it's something that I come back as an adult later going, look what these people, look what this mentor did for me. Look at what they spoke over me. And it's been in my healthy side that I'm able to see it. I didn't always see it when I was younger.
And I like that you said that some of the words spoken over you now, or in the recovery portion, negate some of what was spoken over you as a young child. And I think that speaks to the power of speaking life over someone, as opposed to the negative, the bad things. And it's just, I think it's incredible that one positive statement of life can have so much more power than one negative statement. Unfortunately, as humans, our brains tend to dwell on some of those negative statements. So you mentioned a lot of lessons. So how did you go from, because I imagine you did dwell on some of those negative statements, especially as a teenager, maybe even as a young adult. What kinds of lessons were you able to learn? And what, other than that one mentor, helped you on that learning path, as opposed to what could have been?
Well, I'll start with some recent knowledge, because I feel like I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm still working to get through a lot of the junk that was done. And I'm in a wonderful class right now where I kind of knew this, but it's almost like this is coming to like this big old beautiful, like final, like, oh, I finally get it. It's someone's putting it in simple words for me. And it's basically saying that the root of almost everything that we're going through has to do with our thinking. And then those thoughts, or how we think, turns into a belief about ourselves, about people, about things around us, about life. And then those beliefs turn into how we act or choose to act, which then turns into emotions, and it turns into behaviors. So, in order to repattern some of that and to look at our emotions and how I might fly off the handle, or I might be angry about something in a way, there's nothing wrong with being angry, but it's how we do that. It's the way we present ourselves. And to be honest, I've had major anger issues because of what's been done. And so I've had to go back to a lot of what was said and revisit the thought. So the instance or the thing that then said, oh, wow, I made a decision in that moment that I didn't need people. Or I made a decision in that moment to eat and protect myself and be isolated to keep myself from being attractive. Or I made a decision that people are untrustworthy. So that's the thought I had. And I created a thought that was my belief for life that then caused me to act in a certain way, which then caused me to have emotions a certain way, which caused me to be a certain way. And so I've had to really kind of go back and I would really like to just kind of put a plug here for Celebrate Recovery. If anybody's trying to get through a lot of things, Celebrate Recovery really helped me. And I had a great leader that helped me go back. And there's a step in there called the fourth step, which is a kind of a typical 12-step thing. But the way they had us go back and look at different things helped us be able to see truths around it. And so and having an understanding for another person. So if I look at these people who came into my life and look at either what was spoken over me, what was done to me, I'm able to then look at my behaviors and say, wow, because of this, I did this. Because of this, I did that. And I can look at my own behavior as a result of, well, no wonder I acted that way. I made, later, I mean, this is advanced thinking. I made a decision to do this, or I made a decision that my mom didn't care, or I made a decision that I was going to be separated anyway from my brother. I made a decision that, whatever the decision was, and being able to do that. And so it's been having the mentors that are able to just speak that wisdom. I've to mention like other people that have really helped me. I mean, there's been church leaders, I've had what we would call sponsors of people that have just spent time with me, connecting with me, and helping me kind of just be okay with me, being okay with who I am, because even in the yuck, even in the process of where I am, they're able to even speak that life over me and be able to say, well, Trish, what I know about you is this, and this is not what you believe this to be. And it helps me kind of repattern that thinking and repattern my beliefs about myself that then helps me kind of come out. So I'm not really sure that I answered your question specifically on the people or stories, but I at least kind of gave you the summary of where I am and how I think in terms of the people and the things that have been spoken over me.
That's good. So you mentioned Celebrate Recovery, and I have not participated in that, but I have participated in other 12-step programs. So would you say that Celebrate Recovery is more of a Christian-based or Christian-focused 12-step type
100%.
program?
100%. It's a
Okay.
12-step program that is biblically based, with Jesus being the rescuer and Jesus, God being the, what we ultimately work to have a relationship. My relationship with Jesus is 1,000 times better as a result of going through that program, because before, even though I grew up with church, I was what some people would call a C&E Christian, where I showed up at Christmas and Easter and I just kind of did what I was supposed to do. And I just went to church because that was what I was supposed to do on Sundays. But I would always sit there going, where's the magic in this? And so it was through Celebrate Recovery that I was able to meet Jesus as a person and meet Jesus with a little bit of skin on it, with people he sent my way. Be able to really understand what it means to have a relationship with God, the living God who really wants us to serve him, and then be okay with that, because I used to go, oh my gosh, I don't want to be too religious. I don't want to be one of them. But it helped me get through a lot of those fears. It helped me capture some of that. Speaking of that, is another thing Celebrate Recovery did, is the fears that are all rooted in the way the enemy wants us to think about ourselves. That was another thing huge that the program did, is like letting me be able to see that these are strongholds that, the enemy wants us to stay stuck in. But the freedom that we can come out with in living into that relationship with Jesus it's phenomenal. And it uncovered so much.
Thank you for that explanation, just in case there's others who haven't experienced or don't know what it is. And that also Celebrate Recovery is not specific to alcohol or
Mm,
drugs. It can
no,
be,
yes,
it can be
wait,
more.
yeah, it's more. They Celebrate Recovery is addiction based,
Mhm.
but underneath almost every single addiction is what we would call codependency. And although I personally did not struggle with alcohol or drugs or some sort of an addictive personality in that way, I found that I do have other things that I'm addicted to, that like food or people pleasing, or there's just different things. So there's also a track inside Celebrate Recovery for those who are not suffering with addiction. So anybody who, if I went into this because I had tried so hard with my weight, I was always worried about my weight, and that was kind of the reason there. But also when I would go to church and people would talk about their testimonies, and the struggles that they were talking about were familial struggles, things with their family or things that they couldn't get over, strongholds that were just like normal everyday people getting over anger, or sometimes even porn or different kinds of things that they would be working on. And I realized I didn't have to be in the addiction space to do that. But when we would show up, they always had two separate meetings or sometimes three meetings. They would have an addiction meeting for those recovering in that area, and they would also have a codependency meeting.
Well, I'm glad that we addressed that a little bit, because I think that, people sit and they hear 12 steps and they think, okay, I have to be an alcoholic or I have to be a
Mm-hmm.
drug addict. Um, and I want listeners to know that any of these issues, any of these strongholds, I like that word, um, can be addressed through this, and you don't need to
Mm-hmm.
have an addiction to join. So
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And then I also like what you said about the thoughts to beliefs to actions. And it's very cyclical, because once you have the one belief, then it's very easy to develop another one based on that. But if that first one is based on a lie,
Mm-hmm.
then the second one and the third one and the 17th one are also based
Mm-hmm.
on that foundational lie.
Mm-hmm.
And so you do have to do that whole repattern, retraining to get back, to get
Absolutely.
rid of, undo all of those knots of those lies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yes. Yes. And I can say a lot of my strongholds. I heard something else the other day that I thought was a cool nugget, that, we have these holds in our life, and their strongholds can become strangleholds. And they're the things that, finally take us down if we're not careful. But with this idea of being able to think about one lie, patterning another lie, I realized that my core, almost every single thing that I have started with as that one thing, is the fear of rejection. When my mom on her deathbed, I had a chance to have a conversation with her, and it dawned on me when she said, I'm sorry, she called me Patty. I'm sorry, Patty, you were just in my way. It dawned on me in that moment that my whole life I had felt disposed of. I was disposable, that people could just throw me away or push me aside. I was misunderstood. It's all in that core of rejection, fear of getting close to people, fear of or even putting myself out there too much so that I could be loved, so that I could find somewhere to fit in, so that I could have someone with meaning in my life, because there weren't people that were there all the time. All my life, and even as an adult, I still struggle with some of these kinds of things because my family is very limited. I don't have family, and there's not much around me in sense of like who is in my life where I'm not an afterthought. So those lies that start as a young child from the point of rejection, they build, and that belief just builds, and it grows into this big thing that festers. And so I like how you said that. Yes, you're 100% right. A lot of it just builds on each other. So kind of going back, and it's not boom, we just get over it, we just
Right.
go.
Yeah.
I think some people can, and I 100% believe in the miracle power healing of Jesus.
Mhm.
I know that it can be done, but I also think that there's time and there's lessons to be learned in the unpeeling of an onion, one tiny paper thin little bit at a time. Because I think if we take that protective skin away, we have no tools or resources or abilities to know how to function in that. And so we're lost if you just shed the skin and we go, it happens. It's easier to take it and learn, okay, I can deal with this. Okay, we put this off. Okay, I can, I've got my 2 feet, I'm stable now. Okay, we take this off. And it's one layer of that level at a time so that we can get to a place where, and of course, God can heal anything. 100%. I do believe that.
To that. Yes. But that analogy of an onion is perfect, because if you have built this cycle of lie upon lie upon lie, then you did that over time. You didn't build that, you know, 3 days, 5 days, whatever. And so if you gently pull back one layer at a time and then stabilize and then go for the other one, it reverses everything in, I guess, in a similar pattern or in a similar time frame. And I think that can, as you said, be more healing. It has the potential to be even more healing. Though, I do know people who have been freed from things instantaneously. And it's in God's time, and how God wants it to be the best for that person, and then for that person to move on and help someone else, which I'm using as a segue because I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you are now taking the lessons that you learned and helping others in your adult journey.
This is my favorite part. So I guess it started when I majored in communications and didn't know it. God was doing something in my life at that time. And then I graduated thinking I was going to go into being a reporter for some TV station and something glamorous, which is not, by the way. And then I became a teacher. And that's where it kind of started. I spent 15 years as an educator working with kids, understanding where they come from, having this lens of like, it's not always what it seems, it's working with different personalities and things like that. During that same time, my husband and I got married early as a teacher and then tried to have children and lost a baby and then decided we were going to be foster parents. It was just after my own heart of like, other people cared for me. Why wouldn't I? Then it wasn't long into our fostering journey. Within a few years, the next thing you know, we were able to adopt a little guy. And so then I was raising kids that were fostered, and then some of them returned home, and I was still mentoring and fostering them. Then later became an advocate for these kinds of kids who were aging out of the foster care system and needing a place. They lose so many of their benefits and they don't get a lot of a lot has changed and they get benefits now, but they were losing a lot of the special touch of what a parent would give kids as they're aging out into the system. So my heart has always been for kids who are raised like me. And so I think as now I'm currently a program director for a nonprofit where we get to advocate for these kinds of kids and put resources in place and raise up leaders who are advocates for these kids. And then also I have, a podcast where I get to work with educators because one of the biggest lessons, we all know, I don't know if you've ever been a parent, but parenting is probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I remember when I was teaching, I used to say teaching is the best birth control. And at that time, I would be sitting there, judging all these parents whose kids were having fits on the Target floor. And oh my goodness, never judge anybody because God knows He's going to put us in the same situation. And then the behaviors that come out of and of course, because I'm parenting these kids who come from the same kind of rejection, not only is it triggering my big stuff, it's triggering their big stuff. And then the next thing you know, we're butting heads and behaviors are flying from both of us. I've been on a healing journey, but I'm nowhere near 100% until on this side of heaven. And so triggers and things happen. And then I'm realizing, wow. And then I discovered a curriculum that sang to my soul, not just as a parent, but I just wished and I cried if anybody would have done this with me as a kid, I would have been a completely different person than I did. I mean, there was a period of my life where I went off to promiscuity and partying and all kinds of awful behaviors as a result of what was going on inside of me that was unresolved. And then as I come into this now, I'm like, if someone would have spoken into my life connection, co regulation, compassion, these kinds of things in a way that was not, I needed the consequence, but not punitive, loving like Christ did, or compassionate, there would have been a whole different way of, and I've seen it switch with my kids. When I engage as a certain type of parent that I was raised as versus this type of parent. And so as an educator, I just realized that there's not a lot of people speaking into the kids' lives or doing this kind of stuff. We get being an educator, I remember we get a classroom full of wiggly bodies with central nervous systems that are all kinds of dysregulated, all kinds of things that have happened to these kids or things that have happened to their parents that are then passed down to the kids. And it's like a big bowl of vegetable soup. But there's a way that we can really speak into them and advocate for them and help them regulate and have these skills and be compassionate with where they are. And it's because people did this with me in a way, and because of this curriculum all along, it's fueled me to want to have a better way of raising kids, better than I was done for me. It sings to my soul. It has changed my kids' lives. And I know there's a better way of doing it out there. And I know it's not something, we live in a traditional type of community where people are just doing it the way it's always been done. And so breaking that cycle in a way that's unique is so important to me, that people understand trauma informed ways. They understand social emotional learning. They understand central nervous systems. I mean, I could go on forever and ever, but you can see the passion that's fueled in me, and how that's
Mhm.
come about.
Well, you reminded me of a story, because I started this podcast by saying we both had experiences with group homes, but from different perspectives. And I remembered as you were speaking just about, how we interact with the kids, and maybe taking a different approach. And um, when I was working at this group home, it was the time when the Harry Potter books were very popular. And I know there's controversy in the Christian circles about Harry Potter, but I don't want to get into whether they
Yes.
are good or whether they are bad. Um, but the head of this particular group home handed me, I think it was like two copies of each of books 1, 2, and 3. And at that time, I was working with 9 and 10-year-old boys. And she just asked that I encourage them to read. Now, these are not readers. um, and I was very, very hesitant. And anybody who has picked up a Harry Potter book knows that it is not a short book. None of them are short. I gave these out to a couple of my boys. It was like a Thursday or a Friday, and I was blessed with the Monday through Friday position at this home. And I walked in on Monday morning to Miss G, you need to get me more of those books. I read the whole
Oh
thing.
my goodness.
I was like, what? And a connection had been built there between me and a couple of those boys. That was the one thing. And the other thing was that I had these boys, these rough and tumble boys who had very little hope and were just very physical and very aggressive. And they sat down and they read a 200-300 page book and wanted more
More.
and wanted
Mhm.
more. And it was just taking that different approach and having, a different perspective or a different point of view or trying something new. And it stuck. Now, it didn't work with all 10 boys in the house, but still, one or two boys, and to have it mean something to them. So yeah, I think it's so important to just try those new things and new ways of connecting and using that compassion. that you mentioned. So
It's
that's
all
very
about yep. It's all about the relationship, whether we like it or not. People are not commodities,
right.
where it's about the relationship ultimately.
Yeah, that was a beautiful, I will never remember, I will never forget, will never forget those two or three boys bursting into my office.
That's awesome.
So, um, okay, so you mentioned your podcast and you work actually so you work with educators on your podcast?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about that.
I work with Christian teachers, helping them manage disruptive behaviors. And it is important to me that these educators, number one, love their job. Most of the people who come to me are ones who know that there's a different way and they really want to get to the bottom of it. So I work giving biblical encouragement, first of all, then mental health strategies on how to maintain, their own co-regulation with the kids or their own self-regulation, and then just trauma-informed strategies or SEL practices that work in the classroom when there's a lot of chaos or when things are just unmanageable and it just feels like it's too big to keep going every day.
But that is a blessing to so many educators. So I taught for 3 years, and it was definitely tough in both environments. And I absolutely loved being with those kids. So it's teaching is hard work. It is very hard work. But it's very rewarding. Very
Especially today, we're in a mental health crisis after the pandemic and after, so much is going on in our world and our political climate and things like that. It's a breeding ground for that hate and angst. And it's interesting, the fallout. And then the teachers are the ones left dealing with a lot of it in our public, especially in our public school settings.
That is true. So if somebody is a Christian educator or just an educator, what is the name of your podcast so people can come listen? And if you can share maybe with us if there's any other way that people can get to know you or work with you.
Absolutely. Trish Z as in zebra dot biz /podcast. You can get to all of the podcasts, and that's actually on Apple, or you can go to my website, trishz.com, and you can listen anywhere that there's podcasts. You can search for Society's Child or Christian Teachers, and it'll most likely pop up. And then I also have a Facebook group. If there are educators out there that want a community, I've got a small community where we work on sharing support strategies, and we're there for each other for community, and we're building that. And that's over on Facebook, and you can search for Christian Educator Connection. And I would love to have anybody that's interested, or if you're just exploring what does this look like to even be thinking about trying to deal with disruptive behaviors in this manner, come on over and check it out.
Wonderful. Okay. And then I do believe that you said that you had something that you wanted to offer to our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. Especially if you're an educator, I have created a list of 75 scripture-based affirmations that anybody can use. They're designed more towards educators for the classroom setting, but anybody can use them. And so basically what I did was I took some scriptures and I kind of created some affirmations that we can say to ourselves each day that are based on biblical truth and things that are what I call God's replies to us when we're kind of getting into that stinking thinking. And so you can go to trishz.com /Bible dash AFFS, like affirmations, but cut down short. And you can sign up for that and get on the mailing list and, download that free PDF right there.
Awesome. And I will put that link into the show notes so that they can just click right
Awesome.
on it.
Thank you.
Okay, I have two last questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is you said that you have done a lot of lesson learning by looking back. And I'm wondering if when you look back, if you can see a moment or two of beauty that sticks out to you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I think about is the love, Jesus' love that was shown to me along the way. I don't think if I had gone through some of this, I wouldn't have met some beautiful people that then kind of role modeled how to do life, because I certainly was not being brought up in this type of lifestyle, and I say this type of a healed lifestyle, or what I would call, I hate to say normal because normal is so subjective, but
Right, right.
when you're being brought up in such a dysfunctional world and things are so hateful and crazy and mean and all the yuck is happening at that time, to be able to watch from a distance at how families do life and how they represent Jesus' love, or how they do activities with each other or do families with each other or do quality time, it made my mind, it made my mind open to that kind of thing. And so a lot of times I believe that's some of the beauty that's come out of this, because had I not been in these situations, these people wouldn't be in my life. Someone wouldn't be able to do that. Another thing that I would say is a beauty that's come out of this is learning how to be okay when people around me are not okay. And what I mean by that is sometimes I can see another person who is getting angry or getting upset, or is exhibiting behaviors that would typically stress me out. And this has been something that I've had to grow through. So this is not an easy task or a quick little, anybody can do this kind of thing. It takes a lot of practice. But from the co-regulation strategies that I've learned, I'm okay when they're not. And I can say, this is their journey. I'm able to then look back at where people are and go, that's their stuff, or that's their time. They have to go through this, and it's no reflection on me. In other words, I have this little tip that I say Q-tip, quit taking it personally is what it stands for. And a lot of times when, like, for example, I have a conversation with my son and he's upset about something, and it's really not about me. It's about what's going on inside of him. So I believe that that's another beauty thing that has come out of this. I don't think I would have learned that had I not had this side of me that was dealing with how to be resilient, or learning how to be more self-aware, or learning how to be step into self-improvement. These are little tips that have come out of the journey that I've had that's been yucky, that has now allowed me to have a lot more grace and compassion and gentleness for people that are in front of me that are exhibiting big behaviors.
I think that's a wonderful place to get to. And thank you for pointing out that it's not something, not a switch that you can just
No,
flip, that it is something that takes time and that you have to learn and practice, but it can be done. Can be
it can
done.
be done.
So, and the
Yeah.
last thing is, if do you have any warrior words that you would like to share directly with our listeners?
Absolutely. First of all, I want to encourage you that there is a way forward, no matter where you are and whatever it is you're working through. And be patient with yourself. These things, like I said a moment ago, it's a work in progress, and sometimes it's done as better than perfect, and we just have to get through life doing what we're doing. And then we look back at what was done and we go, oh, but at the same time, don't beat yourself up. Just know that there's a way forward. You got to do what you got to do right now. And you're doing the best that you can with what you have. But the key is that we have to keep looking forward to try to get better and to stay in self awareness, stay in, there's a different way. Be open, what I say, hot, humble, open, and teachable. And if we can do that, then we'll be better tomorrow than we were today. We'll be stronger in Jesus' arms than we were today. And I just want to encourage people, just when it seems really hard, for me, it's about landing in the arms of Jesus. And that's where it is. He's a living, loving God that just wants us to be in relationship with him. And when we're ready, he's there waiting.
Ending. Thank you. Thank you, Trish. I appreciate you being here and you sharing your
You're welcome.
wisdom. And I'm going to remember a couple of those acronyms. I think Q-tip is my favorite.
Oh, good.
So thank you again. I appreciate your time and just thank you for sharing your vulnerability with
Absolutely.
us today.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you. And thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. Thank you. Watch your thoughts. They become words. Watch your words. They become actions. Watch your actions. They become habits. There are several variations on this sentiment, and Trish shared about learning this pattern in her own life. After learning and processing, working through the events of her childhood through her adult eyes, Trish realized that for her, the vicious cycle began with feelings of rejection, that she was disposable. This is what she witnessed and experienced as a very young child. It is the first set of words, the first lie she internalized. This lie then coded the lens through which she viewed her future experiences. This lie enabled more lies to be believed and internalized until a mentor stepped in. A woman believed in Trish. She had compassion and modeled it for her. She helped her see things, sometimes without the coating of that lie on her lenses. So, what is a mentor? According to dictionary.com, a mentor is a trusted leader, teacher, or counselor, or an influential supporter. And that's who Trish's mentor was, an influential supporter. She supported and influenced Trish in such a way that as a high school dropout, she returned to school. She would go on to find other mentors, other supporters in her life through Celebrate Recovery, a compassionate curriculum she found, and through other educators. We all need mentors. And I love how Trish mentioned that some of the people in her life were like Jesus with skin on. Jesus can place mentors in our lives to help influence us to become better people, and then ultimately to help others. He can help us overcome those lies that coat our lenses. He can use these mentors to teach us about mercy, his mercy for us, and the ability for us to extend mercy to others. And Trish showed this beautifully when she talked about learning how to be okay when others are not okay. We can use the mercy extended to us through Jesus and through the mentors he sends us, and then be compassionate to them and ourselves. So who can you mentor? How can you use one of your life's experiences to be a positive influence on someone else's life? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words.